Hello, everyone. Daniel here from the Next Issue Podcast. How's everybody doing? I want to thank everybody that is watching live. If you're watching live, or if you're watching this later, uh, today's stream, real quick. I just want to go over because I watched the Many Saints of Newark, a Sopranos story, but up until today, I had never watched an episode of The Sopranos ever, like at all, ever. Um, so I want to say hi to my buddy Judah in the chat. Left a comment. Uh, Go watch his show. I'll leave a link on the way out. It starts at an hour and a half. And Matt, hey Matt, how you doing? How's it going? Thanks to everybody else watching live, watching this later. So yeah, I've never watched The Sopranos up until today. I watched the pilot right after I watched the movie. So I'll be doing a quick non-spoiler review of the movie, and then I'll also be talking about the first episode of The Sopranos HBO series. So let's get on with it. Like I mentioned, there'll be no spoilers here. I know the movie just came out today, both in theaters and on HBO Max. So I want people to go watch it. So overall, yeah, my recommendation is watch this movie. If you're a fan of The Sopranos, go watch this movie. I think you're gonna enjoy it. If you're not a fan of The Sopranos, but you like gangster films, watch this movie. So The Many Saints of Newark is rated R. Came out today. It is 2 hours long, which is it's a little long, I believe. For I mean, at least for my taste, any movie over 90 minutes, you really have to wow me to like be like, okay, that was worth the extra 90 minutes. I think 90 to 100 minutes is like the perfect sweet spot for a movie for me. So this movie is about the formative years of New Jersey gangster Tony Soprano, played by the great James Gandolfini in the series. So this was directed by Alan Taylor. It is written by Lawrence Connor, with the writing credit to David Chase, who is the creator of the show. So obviously, characters created by David Chase. The movie stars Alessandro Novilla as Dickie Moltisanti, Leslie Odom Jr. as Harold McBriar, and I have questions on that stuff later. John Bernthal as Joni Soprano, Vera Farmiga as Livia Soprano. So those are Tony's parents. Corey Stoll as Junior Soprano, who's Tony's uncle. He also calls Dickie his uncle, but they're not like actually related. Then we have Ray Liotta as Hollywood Dick Moltisanti, Michaela De Rossi as Giuseppina Moltisanti, and Michael Gandolfini, who is James Gandolfini's son, as a teenage Tony Soprano. So, first of all, this is that cast is just like the top of the iceberg. This movie is stacked. Like I don't have the time to go over everyone that is in this film. So let's go over a few highlights. I think Alessandro as Dicky is fantastic. Two of my favorite performances were from John Barenthal. I love John Barenthal in pretty much anything that he does, from The Punisher to like all the other like the movies he's been in, Wolf of Wall Street, stuff like that. Vera Farmiga is great too, especially watching the first episode of the show because I wanted to learn what that character was like. So if you've seen the show, you know what Tony's mom is like, and I think Vera Farmiga does a great job. They use this like, if you've seen the posters, she has this prosthetic nose because Vera Farmiga is gorgeous, right? So they put this prosthetic nose on her to, I don't know, I don't know what the intention was. Maybe to make her look more like the actress that plays Olivia Soprano in the show. Who knows? Corey Stoll, great as Junior Soprano. Like Corey Stoll is great at playing these characters that you're like, oh, that guy's kind of an ass, but he's also like the world just kind of keeps shitting on him. If you watch House of Cards, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Ray Liotta is great. There's only been there's only one movie that I think Ray Liotta like did not do a very good job, and maybe that was just because of the movie. I forget the name, but it's like Ray Liotta's playing a criminal that's being transported uh, on an airplane, and it's like Christmas, and he escapes and then kidnaps the airplane. It's weird, super wild. Like it's just a bad movie though. It was one of those movies from the '90s. Michaela De Rossi, first of all, she delivers a great performance. She is Dickie's wife. when we meet her in the movie. She's also very beautiful. I don't think I'd ever seen a movie with her. But one of the highlights of this movie is Michael Gandolfini as teenage Tony Soprano. Like you, I know it's his kid, and obviously there's a lot there. But I've seen a lot of movies with James Gandolfini, and he has. Oh yeah, Judah in the chat. Yes, Michaela Dorsey. I need to find more movies with her because not only is she a great actress, but she's beautiful to look at. So yeah, uh, Michael Gandolfini just does a great job. Like I've seen a lot of movies with James Gandolfini, and a lot of the mannerisms, like the little things, like he kind of gets down because that's his dad, so he knows him very well. Um, so this is an interesting story as far as like this is just a typical gangster story. It is set in the '60s, so there was more. I guess there was more social commentary from the era than I would think would be in a movie like this. But like I said, I've never really watched The Sopranos, so I don't know how much they dove into talking about social issues. I know the main thing of it is mental health, which is very important. Like that's kind of the crux of the pilot. So we'll talk more about the pilot then. This movie kind of felt to me like if anybody ever seen a Bronx Tale, kind of like that. Obviously, a lot of things that are very similar to movies like The Godfather and just any typical gangster movie we've seen. This movie attempts some things and it delivers on some. Some of them kind of fall flat. So that your mileage may vary. If you love gangster movies, you're probably gonna be on board with this. There's a lot of violence in this movie too, which but it felt like I think it was appropriate because of the topic and the time, everything that was happening. So let's see, Judah. This was way more socially focused than the show. The show is mostly about the psychological component. Okay, yeah, I mean, I could definitely tell just from watching that is the reason that I watched the pilot after watching the movie because I wanted to at least get some context, and also, at the end of the movie, you kind of figure out who's around and like who do these people going to be, and you meet a lot of them in the pilot, right? So I will say, as somebody that has never watched the show, I felt like in the movie a lot of things happened that kind of felt important, but then they kind of went nowhere. Which I think that those are the little things that the creators are doing to be like, hey, do you remember this thing from the show? Like, or do you remember when that like maybe these characters had that conversation about the past, or like this is how that event happened that we talk about in the show. It really feels like there's a lot of very little like nods to people, like just Easter eggs, I would call them, for people that watched all seasons of the show. And like we've had probably mixed experience with prequels. Sometimes it's hard to go back and not fall into the tropes of like let's just explain everything that's happening. Yeah, a quick like a tiny spoiler thing that if you've seen the show, the shooting, like this scene of shooting through the hair, like if you know what the context of that is, um I fucking like I was like what the hell, like like you don't know what's happening. So yeah, that's like all those little details that if you are one of those people that has watched this show over and over, you're gonna pick up on. So I overall I enjoyed the movie. I know for a fact that if I had watched the show I would have enjoyed it more. Like that's indisputable. Because once I did watch the show, which I've always been meaning to. I think The Sopranos and The Wire are two of the big HBO shows that they kind of passed me by. Like I was in this, I don't know, this age that you don't really care that much about TV, or maybe we didn't have HBO at the time, whatever the case may be. So like, yeah, I just kind of missed out on those shows because the show came out in 1999. So in 1999, I was more looking at things like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and stuff like those were the kind of shows that I was watching then, which also great. I mean, I love Buffy. um, so yeah, overall, I think if you're a fan of The Sopranos, although I did go like I mentioned, I checked out the Rotten Tomatoes. Critics are at 74%. The audience is at 56%, which I believe, I think people may have felt a little misled. Like this movie promises that it'll be about, the formative years of Tony Soprano. Your interpretation of that may be way different than what the creators had in mind. I believe they delivered on that, but I can also see from the things I was reading online how people would feel that this movie didn't deliver on that. So your mileage may vary on that front. But like I said, if you watch the show, I 10 out of 10 recommend you check this out. I think it would be a disservice to you as a fan of The Sopranos not to watch this and at least figure out on your own if it's something you enjoyed or not. Um, but yeah, uh, as far as myself, not having watched this show, I don't think this movie has a lot of rewatchability. I would, if I were to watch the show, then I maybe would go back to watch this movie with through a different lens. I think that'd be interesting. I don't know that it'll be happening anytime soon because 6 seasons of HBO shows a lot. Like these episodes are an hour long. But yeah, let me know in the chat if you're watching this later or a comment, whatever. Let me know what you thought of the movie. You can find my full review on Letterboxd. I'll put the link on there. And here we have, yeah, Judah for sure. This is 100 targeting hardcore Soprano fans, so it's definitely worth watching after the show. So speaking of the show, let's talk about the pilot a little bit. I watched the pilot because I wanted some context on like what is it about this show. I didn't even know what the premise of the show other than um, yeah, I didn't even know what the premise of the show was up until like I knew it was about gangsters and Tony Soprano and their waste management company and all the little things that you kind of get through just seeing pop culture, but I never knew the actual premise. I really like the fact that this is kind of put through the lens of like Tony Soprano has a panic attack. He has to go see a shrink, and then through that lens, like that, the visits with the psychologist is the like kind of what informs the show and kind of how you learn what's going on. Um, and it's also really cool to see like all these actors that you've seen them in tons of things, especially anything gangster related for sure. But just tons of things. And like I said, I'm a big fan of James Gandolfini. I recently rewatched The Last Castle, which is a movie with him, Robert Redford. There's so many people in that movie because I think it's from the early 2000s too. So I recommend that. It's on Hulu. But as far as the show itself, I very much enjoyed the pilot. I like the dynamic. Let's see. Oh, Judah has, yeah. Every time you like Tony, he'll do something horrible. Every time you hate Tony, he'll do something endearing. Yeah, I feel like if any of you have watched the Shield on FX, that show about Vic Mackey with who's Michael Chiklis, played by Michael Chiklis. I think they have a very similar thing where you're like, like this dude is not all bad, or this dude is definitely not a good dude, right? I think The Sopranos kind of do the same thing because Tony wants like the main thing he cares about, at least in the premise of the show, it's his family, right? But like, what are the things that he's doing to put that ahead of him? So it's a very interesting dynamic. If you haven't watched The Shield, I also recommend it. It was on basic cable, so it's not as well. It's pretty violent, but but you won't see the gratuitous just the nudity that HBO always offers in their shows. Um, yeah, but the pilot's very good. I like seeing Tony's family. I like some of the characters from the movie. Obviously, they come back because they're still part of this world and part of Tony's life. So it's interesting to see why they picked the people they did to play the younger versions of themselves. One of those being Corey Stoll as Junior Soprano. I think he's probably one of my favorites, both. And when I say favorites, I just mean performance-wise, because the character is kind of a kind of a shit person. But yeah, Corey Stoll in Junior Soprano, and then Junior in the show. And I was gonna say current times, but this show came out in 1989. Um, so let's see. Oh yeah, The Soprano does a good job of tackling the destructive consequences of destructive machismo. Tony's desire to be a man is his greatest enemy. Yeah, I definitely got. I mean, just from the conversation he's having with his psychologist, like that is the first thing he's worried about, right? Like, I mean, I think he tells her about a dream too, where his penis falls off or something. It's this. Yeah, this first episode is pretty wild. I recommend you go watch it if you've never seen it, at least to get a taste of what the Sopranos is like. I mean, you're already watching the movie on HBO, so might as well think of it as a 3-hour movie where you watch the Saints and then you watch the pilot. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. I may start watching The Sopranos. There's so much there. Like, gangster stuff is not my main thing I watch. It's usually like superhero stuff, and then comedy or horror. Like, it kind of depends. But I love a good like crime gangster movie every once in a while. So The Sopranos may be a long term project. Um, I think that's about it. I want to thank everybody that's on the chat. Judah, Matt. Actually, Judah, let me go pull up your link for your show. These guys do Live from the Apocalypse at I Freaking Love Comics. I love their streams. They always have really cool guests. So here, if you're watching on the chat, go check them out later. Uh, they're great. Yeah, and anybody that's on the chat, yeah, in about an hour. Matt, thanks for hanging out in the chat as well. Anybody that's watching this later, thank you for watching. If this is your first time on the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, hit all the buttons you have down there. Oh yeah, they have a comic creator, Aramis's brother, is doing a comic, which is super cool. Anybody that's doing a comic, just like keep making comics. You guys know that's the main thing that we love on our channel. But yeah, thanks everyone. We have some reactions, and we have live on Sunday at 10 a.m. where we're starting our horror coverage. So thanks for watching, everyone. Bye bye.